Then, crouching where he was, he ate the meat and sugar from his pockets, lapped more water, moved back a short distance again into the dry ground beneath the trees, but moved this time without rising to his feet, curled his body into a comfortable position and closed his eyes again to sleep. No single question now raised its head to him. He felt contentment, satisfaction only. He stirred, shook himself open half an eye, and saw, as he had felt already in slumber, that he was not alone. In the park-like spaces in front of him, as in the shadowed fringe of the trees at his back, there was sound and movement, the sound of stealthy feet, the movement of innumerable dark bodies. There was the pad and tread of animals, the stir of backs, of smooth and shaggy beasts in countless numbers. Upon this host fell the light of a half-moon sailing high in a cloudless sky. The gleam of stars, sparkling in the clear night air like diamonds, shone reflected in hundreds of ever-shifting eyes, most of them but a few feet above the ground. The whole valley was alive. He sat upon his haunches, staring, but staring in wonder, not in fear, though the foremost of the great host were so near that he could have stretched an arm and touched them. It was an ever-moving, ever-shifting throng he gazed at, spellbound in the pale light of moon and stars, now fading slowly towards the approaching dawn. And the smell of the forest itself was not sweeter to him in that moment than the mingled perfume, raw, pungent, acrid, of this furry host of beautiful wild animals that moved like a sea, with a strange murmuring too, like sea, as the myriad feet and bodies passed to and fro together. Nor was the gleam of the starry phosphorescent eyes less pleasantly friendly than those happy lamps that light home-lost wanderers to cozy rooms and safety. Through the wild army, in a word, poured to him the deep comfort of the entire valley, a comfort which held both the sweetness of invitation and the welcome of some magical homecoming. No thoughts came to him, but feeling rose in a tide of wonder and acceptance. He was in his rightful place. His nature had come home. There was this dim, vague consciousness in him that after long, futile straying in another place where uncongenial conditions had forced him to be unnatural and therefore terrible, he had returned at last where he belonged. Here, in the valley of the beast, he had found peace, security, and happiness. He was at last, himself. It was a marvelous, even a magical scene he watched, his nerves at highest tension, yet quite steady, his senses exquisitely alert, yet no uneasiness in the full, accurate reports they furnished. Strong as some deep flood tide, yet dim, as with untold time and distance, rose over him the spell of long-forgotten memory of a state where he was content and happy, where he was natural. The outlines, as it were, of mighty primitive pictures flashed before him, yet were gone again before the detail was filled in. He was the great army of the animals. They were all about him now. He crouched upon his haunches in the center of an ever-moving circle of wild forest life. Great timber wolves he saw pass to and fro, loping past him with long stride and graceful swing, their red tongues lolling out. They swarmed in hundreds. Behind, yet mingling freely with them, rolled the huge grizzlies, not clumsy as their uncouth bodies promised, but swiftly, lightly, easily, their half-tumbling gait masking agility and speed. They gamboled, sometimes they rose and stood half upright. They were comely in their mass and power. They rolled past him so close that he could touch them. And the black bear and the brown went with them, bears beyond counting, monsters and little ones, a splendid multitude. Beyond them, yet only a little farther back, where the park-like spaces made free movement easier, rose a sea of horns and antlers like a miniature forest in the silvery moonlight. The immense tribe of deer gathered in vast throngs beneath the starlit sky. Moose and caribou he saw, the mighty wapiti, and the smaller deer in their crowding thousands. He heard the sound of meeting horns, the tread of innumerable hoofs, the occasional pawing of the ground as the bigger creatures maneuvered for more space about them. A wolf, he saw, was licking gently at the shoulder of a great bull moose that had been injured. And the tide receded, advanced again, once more receded, rising and falling like a living sea whose waves were animal shapes, the inhabitants of the Valley of the Beast. Beneath the quiet moonlight they swayed to and fro before him. They watched him, knew him, recognized him. They made him welcome. He was aware, moreover, of a world of smaller life that formed an undersea, as it were. Numerous undercurrents, rather, running in and out between the great upright legs of the larger creatures. These, though he could not see them clearly, covered the earth, he was aware, in enormous numbers, darting hither and thither, now hiding, now reappearing, too intent upon their busy purposes to pay him attention like their huger comrades, yet ever and anon tumbling against his back, cannoning from his sides, scampering across his legs even, then gone again with a scuttering sound of rapid little feet, and rushing back into the general host beyond. And with this smaller world also he felt at home. How long he sat gazing, happy in himself, secure, satisfied, contented, natural. He could not say, but it was long enough for the desire to mingle with what he saw, to know closer contact, to become one with them all. Long enough for this deep, blind desire to assert itself, so that at length he began to move from his mossy seat towards them, to move, moreover, as they moved, and not upright on 2 feet. The moon was lowered now, just sinking behind a towering cedar whose ragged crest broke its light into silvery spray. The stars were a little paler, too. A line of faint red was visible beyond the heights at the valley's eastern end. He paused and looked about him as he advanced slowly, aware that the host already made an opening in their ranks, and that the bear even nosed the earth in front, as though to show the way that was easiest to follow. Then suddenly a lynx leaped past him into the low branches of a hemlock, and he lifted his head to admire its perfect poise. He saw in the same instant the arrival of the birds, the army of the eagles, hawks, and buzzards, birds of prey, the awakening flight that just precedes the dawn. He saw the flock in streaming lines, hiding the whitening stars a moment as they passed with a prodigious whir of wings. There came the hooting of an owl from the tree immediately overhead where the lynx now crouched, but not maliciously, along its branch. He started. He half rose to an upright position. He knew not why he did so, knew not exactly why he started, but in the attempt to find his new, and it now seemed his unaccustomed balance, one hand fell against his side and came in contact with a hard, straight thing that projected awkwardly from his clothing. He pulled it out, feeling it all over with his fingers. It was a little stick. He raised it nearer to his eyes, examined it in the light of dawn now growing swiftly, remembered or half-remembered what it was, and stood stock still. "The totem stick," he mumbled to himself, yet audibly finding his speech, and finding another thing, a glint of peering memory, for the first time since entering the valley. A shock of fire ran through his body. He straightened himself, aware that a moment before he had been crawling upon his hands and knees. It seemed that something broke in his brain, lifting a veil, flinging a shutter free, and memory peered dreadfully through the widening gap. I'm Grimwood," his voice uttered, though below his breath. "Two Shelley's left me. I'm alone." He was aware of a sudden change in the animals surrounding him. A big gray wolf sat 3 feet away, glaring into his face. At its side, an enormous grizzly swayed itself from one foot to the other. Behind it, as if looking over its shoulder, loomed a giant wapiti, its horns merged in the shadows of the drooping cedar boughs. But the northern dawn was nearer, the sun already close to the horizon. He saw details with sharp distinctness now. The great bear rose, balancing a moment on its massive hindquarters, then took a step towards him, its front paws spread like arms. Its wicked head lolled horribly as a huge bull moose, lowering its horns as if about to charge, came up with a couple of long strides and joined it. A sudden excitement ran quivering over the entire host. The distant ranks moved in a new, unpleasant way. 1,000 heads were lifted, ears were pricked, a forest of ugly muzzles pointed up to the wind. And the Englishman, beside himself suddenly with a sense of ultimate terror that saw no possible escape, stiffened and stood rigid. The horror of his position petrified him. Motionless and silent, he faced the awful army of his enemies, while the white light of breaking day added fresh ghastliness to the scene which was the setting for his cruel death in the Valley of the Beast. Above him crouched the hideous lynx, ready to spring the instant he sought safety in the tree. Above it again he was aware of 1,000 talons of steel, fierce hooked beaks of iron, and the angry beating of prodigious wings. He reeled, for the grizzly touched his body with its outstretched paw. The wolf crouched just before its deadly spring. In another second, he would have been torn to pieces, crushed, devoured, when terror, operating naturally as ever, released the muscles of his throat and tongue. He shouted with what he believed was his last breath on earth. He called aloud in his frenzy. It was a prayer to whatever gods there be. It was an anguish cry for help to heaven. "Ishtar! Great Ishtar, help me!" His voice rang out while his hand still clutched the forgotten totem stick. And the red heaven heard him. Grimwood that same instant was aware of a presence that, but for his terror of the beast, must have frightened him into sheer unconsciousness. A gigantic red Indian stood before him. Yet while the figure rose close in front of him, causing the birds to settle and the wild animals to crouch quietly where they stood, it rose also from a great distance, for it seemed to fill the entire valley with its influence, its power, its amazing majesty. In some way, moreover, that he could not understand, its vast appearance included the actual valley itself with all its trees, its running streams, its open spaces, and its rocky bluffs. These marked its outline, as it were, the outline of a superhuman shape. There was a mighty bow, there was a quiver of enormous arrows, there was this red-skinned figure to whom they belonged. Yet the appearance, the outline, the face and figure too, these were the valley, and when the voice became audible, it was the valley itself that uttered the appalling words. It was the voice of trees and wind, and of running, falling water that woke the echoes in the Valley of the Beast, as in that same moment the sun topped the ridge and filled the scene, the outline of the majestic figure too, with a flood of dazzling light.
"You have shed blood in this my valley. I will not save!"
The figure melted away into the sunlit forest, merging with the newborn day. But Grimwood saw close against his face the shining teeth. Hot, fetid breath passed over his cheeks. A power enveloped his whole body as though a mountain crushed him. He closed his eyes. He fell. A sharp, crackling sound passed through his brain, but already unconscious, he did not hear it. His eyes opened again, and the first thing they took in was fire. He shrank back instinctively. "It's all right, old man. We'll bring you round. Nothing to be frightened about." He saw the face of Iredell looking down into his own. Behind Iredell stood Tushali. His face was swollen. Grimwood remembered the blow. The big man began to cry. "Painful still, is it?" Iredell said sympathetically. "Here, swallow a little more of this. It'll set you right in no time." Grimwood gulped down the spirit. He made a violent effort to control himself, but was unable to keep the tears back. He felt no pain. It was his heart that ached, though why or wherefore he had no idea.
"I'm all to pieces,"
he mumbled, ashamed, yet somehow not ashamed.
"My nerves are rotten."
"What's happened?" There was as yet no memory in him. "You've been hugged by a bear, old man. But no bones broken. Tushali saved you. He fired in the nick of time. A brave shot, for he might easily have hit you instead of the brute."
"The other brute,"
whispered Grimwood as the whiskey worked in him and memory came slowly back.
"Where are we?"
he asked presently, looking about him. He saw a lake, canoes drawn up on the shore, 2 tents and figures moving. Iredell explained matters briefly, then left him to sleep a bit. Tushali, it appeared, traveling without rest, had reached Iredale's camping ground 24 hours after leaving his employer. He found it deserted, Iredale and his Indian being on the hunt. When they returned at nightfall, he had explained his presence in his brief native fashion.
He struck me, and I quit. He hunt now alone in Ishtat's Valley of the Beast. He is dead, I think. I come to tell you.
Iredale and his guide, with Tushali as leader, started off then and there, but Grimwood had covered a considerable distance, though leaving an easy track to follow. It was the moose tracks and the blood that chiefly guided them. They came up with him suddenly enough, in the grip of an enormous bear. It was Tushali that fired. The Indian lives now in easy circumstances, all his needs cared for, while Grimwood, his benefactor but no longer his employer, has given up hunting. He is a quiet, easy-tempered, almost gentle sort of fellow, and people wonder rather why he hasn't married. Just the fellow to make a good father, is what they say. So kind, good-natured, and affectionate. Among his pipes, in a glass case over the mantelpiece, hangs a totem stick. He declares it saved his soul, but what he means by the expression, he has never quite explained. End of The Valley of the Beast by Algernon Blackwood.